Hey guys, Luke here, and another episode for you. Today we're going to talk a little bit about adjusting workouts. I'm recording this, 1st of August. So most of you, if you're training for a fall marathon, you're into training a little bit. Some of you more than others, but we are getting to the point where we're going to hit peak summer pretty soon, and then if you can just survive through August. September is usually much better. At least the mornings are a little bit cooler, and then workouts go a little bit better. So, I know a lot of you are probably questioning yourselves right now, questioning your fitness, questioning your sanity on choosing to run an October marathon. I don't blame you. I don't think I would do that much anymore, but not much choice when you're trying to run like Berlin and Chicago and get those world majors knocked out. So you got to do what you got to do. But anyway, I think I want to. The big thing here with this is that I see it's a lot like with the winter, where people they want to be tough and they want to do they want to hit their pace regardless of what the conditions are, right? And so, it's interesting. I saw some interesting conversations in our Facebook group, and I personally don't understand it. I don't understand what the logic is for some of it, because it's just like, I don't know how you expect that you're going to be better at doing your pace than what Mother Nature can throw at you from a weather standpoint, right? Like, they're going to win. Right? They're going to win no matter what you do, right? So you can either fight it and end up in a position where you're either just completely burnt out, or you're just completely demoralized because you don't think your fitness is really there, or you can adjust and, find ways to do what you need to do and then trust that you're going to be fit, right? And so so if you're the person who's not going to budge, then you can probably stop listening right now, because it really doesn't matter what I say. You're not going to want to do it. You're going to want to do it your way, and that's fine. And if it works, that's great. But from my experience, it just doesn't work for the vast majority of people. It just fries them, literally, figuratively, physically, mentally, however you cut it. It just usually doesn't work well. So that's what I want to talk about today. So I know that you know the basics. Like, you can just run a lot earlier in the morning, or you can adjust your paces, things like that. So I'm not going to go into that. I want to obviously do those things if you can. Like I use the example for myself here where we're at in Michigan. This time of year, it's hit or miss. Like, the last 2 mornings have actually been pretty solid. It's like 60 degrees at 5:30, 6 in the morning, right? And it's daylight enough where you could 100% go out and get a workout in. But by the afternoon, it's 85 plus degrees, right? So there's a pretty big swing between the morning and the afternoon. Whereas I know some people, it's just nasty all the time, right? So that's not going to do a whole lot for you. And then adjusting the paces, some people just really struggle with doing that, but I don't really want to hash on that. So I want to get into some other things and work based on the type of workout that you're doing. So first things first, I do think we need to talk about, you do need to acclimate to the weather, right? So even if I tell you to take your workout inside to the treadmill, you still need to be getting some runs outside, right? You need to be dealing with that heat and humidity. Learning to tolerate it, getting adapted to it, things like that. So, but on the other hand, you have to balance it out, right? Like, you can't just push all the time and expect your body to hold up, right? It's just not going to happen. So, what I'm going to offer up is just really kind of things you can do to break that up. Like I said, you don't have to do these all the time. You don't have to do them for every workout, but if you need a break, these are things that you can do and not have to worry about losing fitness or have it not have the same effect for you, right? And honestly, I've had athletes do some of this stuff right now, a couple athletes in Texas, and they're like, okay, I'll just move my runs inside and see what happens. And it was like complete 180 of how they felt. Not even on their runs, but just in general throughout the day. Like they just recovered better, all that good stuff. So like they still run outside, but if it gets really bad, they'll just bring it inside and run in the gym, things like that. And it's made a huge difference. I mean, because we went from like really kind of worrying how we were going to get through the summer to they've definitely perked back up and are running strong again, right? And they're still doing, I would say they're doing 80% of their runs in the weather they were, and then it's just like one or two runs every now and then that are taken inside, or we figure something else out. So, all right. So with that out of the way, let's talk about speed workouts first. So is the obvious way you can adjust is beyond adjusting our paces is bring the workout into the treadmill, like we've talked about. And I know it's a dirty word for a lot of you. In the hardcore, they're going to tell me how does it make you a real runner or whatever. That's cool, right? Like if you think that's what makes you a real runner, then whatever, do what you got to do. But I also think that having heat stroke doesn't make you a runner for a while either, and then it might be the end of your season. So I think you have to weigh your options. Personally, though, I would tend to go. It would be very hard for me to do just a straight up speed work. Like if somebody gave me, 6x800 at 5K pace, 5K pace on the treadmill absolutely scares the heck out of me, right? Like I just have visions of me flying off the back of the treadmill, stepping wrong on the side of it, and just doing something stupid, right? And then my face is buried into a treadmill belt, and that's the last thing that I really want to have to deal with, right? So to me, honestly, I probably wouldn't just take my workout inside and do that. But what you could do is we have our treadmill calculator. It's on our website, lukehumphrey.running.com. If you have a plan and final surge through us, you can reach it. It's for our Run Club members. You can reach it in both places, and it'll give you breakdown. Basically, you can plug in, okay, here's the speed I could tolerate. What grade do I need to put it in to make it equal to the pace that I would be running outside is the gist of how you'd use that calculator. So it's not perfect, but it gets you close. And a lot of times close is pretty darn good. And so we'll do that. We usually do it in the winter, but for those in the really hot and humid areas, this is probably what we would be doing for you instead. Like instead of talking about this in the winter, we talk about it now in the summer for you guys. So I like that idea, right? And you can do that. Or you could just turn it to straight up hills and do a hill workout, right? So again, you could just take the speed if you're running an 8-minute pace easy and you don't really want to change the pace, but you want the effort to be higher, then you could just go and use that calculator and say, okay, this will, if I put it at this grade, then I would be at this kind of effort, right? And that's kind of what you're looking at, right? And so that's probably the easiest thing to do with the speed workouts. Or you could turn it into a fartlek, and you could turn it into a fartlek inside on the treadmill. Very easy to do, especially if you're not necessarily going by speed straight up. If you're using a combination of speed and grade, then I would just go by effort. So like if you had, go back to our 6x800 example. So if you had 6x800s at 5K pace, and that would normally take you, about 3 minutes, then just do 6 times 3 minutes and have that be your workout. You could do the same thing outside too, because you have to look at it. We're not, you take a workout like a 6x800, what are we trying to do? We're trying to accomplish a certain pace over a certain distance, right? And so if you flip that, and now we're saying, I just want an effort for a certain amount of time, then you take that pressure off yourself to hit the pace, and then hit the pace for that distance, right? So you can just do more effort-based over a certain amount of time. And to me, that it usually goes quite a bit better. And then if you don't have to go to a track where it's going to be, more than likely you're going to be in the sun. You could maybe do this on a path where you are at least have some shade and stuff like that, right? So it does open the doors a little bit. But speed work, in general, speed workouts don't affect us as much, right? And especially if you are doing it earlier in the morning or later in the day when the sun's not in the peak of the sky, you definitely can do this. But we know that speed is less affected by heat because it's usually a shorter workout. The repeats are shorter distances, so you're doing an 800, you get a jog, you get another 800, you get another jog. That's a lot easier to recover from than doing a 6 to 8 mile tempo run at marathon pace, right? That's where you don't get a break, and then you're trying to sustain that harder pace for a lot longer time, right? So this you tend to not be as affected as much. It still sucks for sure. Don't get me wrong, and I'm not trying to sugarcoat that, but we tend to tolerate that a little bit better. So that's the easiest things that I would do for speed workouts. Going into the strength, which at this time, if you're doing something like a Berlin, you're probably getting close to starting your strength. So your first 3 or 4 strength workouts in August are probably not going to be super pleasant from a temperature and humidity standpoint, but it's an oddball intensity, and I get that it's an oddball intensity, right? Because for our 4-hour and above crew, it's really not much different than marathon pace, and so you might be fine just doing this as they are, because I know a lot of you're actually a little bit fast on your marathon pace anyway, so breaking it up into 6 by a mile or something like that is probably actually a little bit easier on you anyway. For the 3:30 and faster crew, especially more the closer you get to 3 hours, what we'll see is that the strength is actually creeping in on what your lactate threshold is. So you're creeping into that lactate threshold territory. And so you'll need to be careful not to overstep that boundary, because then you're changing the scope of the workout, right? And so you really do want to be careful with that. So if you are in that range, and you'll see that, you'll notice it if you plug it into our training pace calculator. You'll notice that because all of a sudden your strength zone will get really short, and then it'll bump right into your LT zone, right? And so you'll know at that point, if there's no separation there and one of those zones are getting shorter, then you'll know that you're probably creeping into that point. But it's usually the closer you are to 3 hours. So yeah, if you do that, then maybe just scale back to like marathon pace and do it, because the intensity would still be just a little bit faster than that, be closer to what your strength intensity really is, right? And if you're doing like an October marathon or later, Detroit, Chicago's early October, then you get into Detroit, Marine Corps, Indy's late October now, and then New York, and then you're starting to get into where you're not really going to be touching these until September, and you usually don't have that kind of issue, right? So it's one of those things where you might have a little bit of a problem early on, but it's eventually just the calendar is going to help you out here. And then let's go into tempo runs. This is where, because tempo runs you might have already started. You've already done speed, and the tempo runs have started for pretty much everyone. So to be honest, from I would say mid-June through the end of August, I hardly give my athletes continuous tempos, right? If I do, it's usually no more than 6 miles, and it's only once in a while. And even when I was in the ODP, we never really did a lot of just straight up tempo runs over the summer. We would do a lot of things like how your strength workouts are broken up, right? We would do 6 by mile, 3 by 2, 4 by 2, 5 by 2, all that stuff right there, 5 by mile and a half, all those types of workouts that you do for strength. And we would just do them at marathon pace, which, effort-wise was probably actually a little bit faster than marathon pace, right? So that's the easiest thing to do. The only thing you want to do with that is you want to make those recoveries short. So if you're doing a 6 by 1 mile, if those are 8-minute pace, you really don't want to be more than like 2 to 3 minutes jog recovery, right? So the miles would be the shortest recovery. And then if you got up to where you were doing something like, 3 by 3 or something like that, maybe like a 3 or 4 minute jog recovery in between that. But the key to that is you break it up and you can still keep the pace, but you would make it very short recovery. Whereas, I know for like the strength workouts, you do actually get a fairly long recovery. Like even for the 6 by mile, it's usually like a half mile recovery. And depending on what your pace is, that could be 5 minutes for somebody, right? Whereas if I'm doing a 6x1 at marathon pace, I want that fairly short recovery, right? I don't want you spending a long time getting fully recovered from that. And then you're not going to get the benefit from the workout. So in any case, like I said, 6x1, 4.5, and that's probably where a lot of people are going to be early on when they get to 4, 5, 6 mile tempos. By the time you get to the 8 mile tempos, it's hopefully September, maybe the end of August. Maybe you break that up and do something like 4x2 or something like that. And there's a lot of ways you can do it. 3x3 I like. That was a staple of our training diet. Later workouts, if you're in a position where you want to break those up a little bit, I like something like the 5-3-2, 5 miles, 3 miles, 2 miles, and then I give the 4-3-2-1 workout, 4 miles, 3 miles, 2 miles, 1 mile. So you start off with the biggest one first and then kind of work it down. It's a little easier mentally to do for a lot of people, but you're still able to get a lot of the volume in. And honestly, if you're somebody who's putting your own stuff together, if you break it up, you can actually give yourself more volume earlier in the segment, right? So instead of being like 8 to 10 weeks out starting 8 mile tempo runs, you're doing 4x2. You could start that a few weeks earlier, because it's not gonna take as much out of you because you're getting that extra recovery, right? So it is a nice thing to do. And then and honestly, like if you really feel like you need more recovery in between workouts, say you do a Tuesday speed workout and then you have a week where it's supposed to be, sometimes it's like 8 and 8 or 10 and 10 on the weekends instead of the longer runs on Sunday. That would be a good time to maybe shift that Thursday tempo to a Saturday and do the workout on Saturday, and then take Sunday, Monday to recover again. So you have you can take a good week where you're kind of spacing things out a little bit more, kind of catch your breath, and pull yourself back from the edge a little bit if you have to, right? So, but that's that we've talked about that before, not necessarily the scope of today, but by the time you get to those bigger workouts, hopefully you'll be past the hottest of the days. But then, so say this is in September, where it can still be very, very warm in September. So if you get a day where it's cool, say go for your regular tempo. But then if you have a day that's hot, break it up and just take what comes with you that week, right? And then of course you can always do the treadmill. I like doing I actually don't mind doing treadmills if you want, especially if you want to keep that continuous tempo in that earlier hotter part of this segment. Just because for me and for what it's done for my athletes is that they can feel better about where their fitness is, because it is usually a little bit easier for them to do the tempo inside than outside, and it really keeps them where they can practice their nutrition at marathon pace earlier in the segment. And the better I can get that person with doing their nutrition every single week, 2 to 3 times a week, on their tempo runs and their long runs, the much further ahead they're going to be when it comes time to race, right? Because they're going to be used to, like, oh, my stomach feels full, I don't feel like taking in the fluids, but then they still can. They know that they still can, and they'll be okay because they've done it over and over and over again. They're not waiting until later in the segment to actually get going with that stuff, right? So, and that's something I feel like you really should be practicing as much as you can, as early as you can. And then finally, let's talk about long runs. One is run for time. Many times over the summer, I'll schedule my athletes again. So a lot of times I don't even schedule them a set distance. I'll just give them, a 90-minute run all the way up to a 2.5-hour run, sometimes a 3-hour run, depending on the person. And so what I'll just do is I'll see what they're averaging pace-wise for their runs during the week, and then I'll use that as my guide to give them anywhere from 12 to 16-mile long runs. So if that 12 miles close to an hour and a half, I'll say, go out and run 12 miles, or go run 90 minutes, and I know that's going to give them about 12, right? But we're not putting the emphasis on the pace. Again, it's like that fart, like we're taking it and just saying, I just need to run for X amount of time. It doesn't matter what the pace is, right? Because and for the long run paces and stuff, they'll usually fall in that range somewhere, usually maybe on the slower side of that range, which is perfectly fine, because again, the intensity of that run's going to be a little bit higher, right? And so instead of forcing them to run a faster pace for a set distance, and then they're going to just be doing that and not necessarily working on their nutrition and fluids, this allows them to feel comfortable slowing down, because we're just talking about running time and effort, right? And then hopefully that gets them to be practicing a little bit more. Because sometimes if you send yourself into that hole trying to run a certain pace in those long runs, and your stomach doesn't feel good, and you just stop doing the stuff that you need to do. It's practicing the fuel and the fluids, right? And so, that if we can minimize that and get them to practice even more, we're going to come out ahead at the end. And then the treadmill, and again, I like for the treadmill, as far as what it is for the what I talked about for the tempo run, is just it gives a person, you usually have a couple cup holders. We can stick 2 big old water bottles out there. We can get all our gels out there, and we can just practice, right? And we can get our pace in for what we want to hit for the long runs. And again, it's going to build that confidence. Be like, if you're slogging through on these workouts every single time and you're not hitting anything, morally that can be super defeating, right? And so if you go in and you go into the treadmill and you do one of those like a tempo run or a long run, and you're like, holy cow, I crushed it. Okay, I'm not as bad off as I thought I was, right? If we can do that every once in a while, and we keep that confidence high and keep you practicing all your fluids and nutrition on a much more consistent basis, it's going to keep us positive. It's going to reinforce our fitness level, and then we're going to get that practice for the fluids and stuff in, right? So that's why I'm not opposed to that. I mean, I do that a lot in the winter myself. The summer is usually okay for me not to do that, but again, like just with my athletes in Florida and Texas and stuff like that, like it's brutal. Like I think it's hot here, and then they tell me they show me what their dew points and stuff are, and it's like, holy cow, I don't even know how you're doing. I don't know how you can even train for a marathon in that. So you have to be super, super careful, and it just kind of gives you a day to reset, right? If you can just do one workout where you're not just wiped out from losing 5 pounds of sweat and things like that, then we can pull ourselves back from that edge a little bit and save our segment, right? So like I said, right, if you're not doing that if you're doing that stuff outside all the time, and you're always getting to a point where you just break down mentally or physically, you've got to pull yourself back from that edge. And these things can do that. Like I said, it doesn't have to be all the time. It doesn't have to be every workout. It doesn't have to be every week. But if you find yourself getting to that edge, do some of these things and pull yourself back from that edge, and make sure that you're ready to rock and roll in October when you want to be, right? And so you just got to get that out of your head somehow. Like, it doesn't make you any tougher of a runner if you're just beating your head against a wall, doing the same thing, and then wondering why you're not making it all the way through the segment, or just beating yourself up mentally saying that I'm not fit, when reality is you're probably just fine. You're probably very fit. It's just you're dealing with all this stuff on a regular basis, right? And it's not sustainable, right? All right. So the one caveat I have to the treadmill is, obviously, if your treadmill's in your garage, then the treadmill's probably not the best idea, right? Like, because it's probably hotter in your garage than it is outside. I mean, I know it is in my garage. So by all means, skip the treadmill, figure something else out. But if it's in your basement and the air conditioning, or if you're going to the gym and it's at least not 85 degrees, and you have it 68, 70 degrees and no humidity, that makes a big difference, right? So obviously use some discernment there on that. But so that's it. So that's really it. There's simple ways that you can change the scope of your workout, but get what you need out of the workout. And I think that is crucial, especially as we are in August now. You've got a good month where you're really still going to have to be in that sufferfest. And unfortunately, if you're running an October marathon, now is when you're really getting into that peak training, right? So I think for some groups, you just passed into week 9 of the marathon plan. If you're doing the regular 18-week plan, which is just like the marathon, right? Numerically, you're at halfway, but we all know that the hardest part is still yet to come, right? The majority of your hard work is in the last 9 weeks, right? So we are not at halfway as far as that goes. It's like you're not even at mile 20 yet. So you just have to be careful. All right. So hopefully that helps some of you out and gives you some things to think about, and maybe spark some ideas in your own head that you can do what you need to do, but not make a lot of mistakes on this heat and humidity. So, all right, that's it for now. I will talk to you later. All right, see you later.